All right, so what is bias and how does that affect the results of our surveys and our observational studies and things like that? So bias, we may do this survey, we may do this observational study, maybe experiment uh, based on how we take our sample. But then maybe some bias showed up. And what is bias going to do? It's going to have the tendency of a measurement, maybe like the average GPA, the tendency of a measurement to be, what's the word I'm looking for? To be non-representative of the population. Yes, I sure will. And we'll talk about what that means. So the tendency of a measurement to be non-representative of the population. I'll give you a couple examples too. We talked about like the average height of people at Pike County High School, right? Maybe I want to find the average height of people at Pike County High School. What could I do? I could go sample the boys basketball team. And if I go sample the boys basketball team, is their average height going to be representative of the entire school population? No, that's bias. And how did we create that bias? That's a form of sampling bias. So that's what I just did. I just did this idea. I gave you an example of sampling bias. But what is sampling bias? Sampling bias is bias in which a sample is collected in a way that leaves out members of the population. So we're collecting this sample, but our sample is not very representative overall of the entire population. Like the boys basketball team. Let's say another example of this. I want to know the average GPA of all the students at Pike County High School. So very conveniently, I'm going to survey my 6-period class, which is a gifted honors class. I would imagine that your GPAs are probably what compared to maybe a non-gifted honors class? Probably higher, if I had to guess, because all of you are in gifted honors math class. So you probably have a higher GPA, especially if I go down to Miss Jones's room and I'm down there in a room full of people that are doing credit recovery because they failed one or more classes. Their GPA is probably a lot lower than you guys. So by taking that sample, I've left out members of the population, which would most likely be the best representative sample and which would be the worst. And we're trying to determine the voting preferences for the next presidential election in the city of Lawrenceville. So the reporter is going to go down to the courthouse, part A. The reporter goes down to the courthouse, and he's just going to ask the people in front of the courthouse their voting preference. Maybe that's good, maybe that's not. B, an analyst gets a spreadsheet list from public records of a telephone number of each resident of the city. The computer randomly sorts that list, and then we choose the first 100 off that list. C, a surveyor is going to leave a survey at the front of all the restaurants in the city. You're just going to leave it there, and then people can fill it out if they want to. Or D, a surveyor goes to a local middle school and asks the students at the local middle school their preference. So of those four, which one do you think might be the best? Probably B. I would agree. The highlighter is not really going to work. So let's click on the pencil. B. B is probably the best. If we were to explain why B is the best, what explanation we might give for that? Random. It's random. It is absolutely random. It said it right there. Does every member of the population have an equal chance of being selected? Yeah. Yes. So it is probably very representative of the entire population. And which one of those would probably be the worst? D. Yeah, middle school. Why would middle school be the worst? Because they only say who their parents say. They might say what their parents say. That's a good answer. But what is our population? Go back to like that very first day we talked about the population and sample, and we said, hey, if I want to study the voting preference for the next president in the city of Lawrenceville. What is our population at that point? Probably those people that can what? Probably those that can vote. Can middle school students vote? So is this sample even part of my population? No. Am I leaving out a whole bunch of people in my population? Actually, everyone. So middle school, they're actually not even part of the population. And since they're not part of the population that I'm actually interested in studying, I'm not asking any of those people what their preferences are. And they could also probably just feel the way their parents feel. Part A, how could bias come up in part A? Like you're going down to the courthouse, people are walking by, and you just ask people as they walk by the courthouse. How could that be potentially biased? It might be people you know.
There may be a rally for one of the parties.
Yeah, there might be a rally for a specific presidential candidate that day. And if there's a rally for a specific presidential candidate that day at the courthouse, who do you think is going to be at the courthouse? Yeah, the people that probably support that candidate. So you're going to ask all these people and they're going to be like, oh, I support this candidate. And all of them are going to probably say the exact same thing. So part A could be good, but it's not great. It's definitely not great because you don't know who's going to walk by the courthouse. If on a normal business day, who normally goes to the courthouse on a normal business day? Criminals. And maybe criminals would support one candidate over the other. Maybe. I don't know. But there could be some potential bias there in front of the courthouse. Part C. How could there be bias in part C, maybe? Bias in part C. They're just going to fill out a survey. Is everybody going to fill out the survey? No. So then we end up with this idea of non-response bias. So part C does fall into this category of non-response bias. Any type of voluntary response thing is going to have some type of non-response bias built into it. So looking at non-response bias, there's a difference. There is a difference. I guess we could put a major difference maybe, but there's a difference in those that respond and those that do not respond. Who's more likely to fill out a survey? Who's more likely at a restaurant? There's comment cards that you can fill out comments and you can rate like your meal and your experience at that restaurant from 1 to 10. Who's more likely to fill that comment card out? Somebody that's mad, somebody that has not had a very good experience there. And they want everybody in the world to know, I'm never coming back here, and I'm going to tell everybody in the world that they shouldn't eat there either.
And then they just come back next Monday because it's starting place.
Yeah, very possible. Very possible. But those that are strongly opinionated are the ones that are more likely to respond. What if I went in there and I just had a good meal, good service? It wasn't like amazing, like the best meal I've ever had, but it wasn't bad either. Am I going to fill that comment card out? Probably not. So there's definitely a difference in those that respond and those that don't respond. So if I'm only looking at the ones that respond, the ones that are strongly opinionated, probably because they had a bad experience, my results might be a little off. It's not going to be representative of everybody that ate at that restaurant. And if it is, the restaurant's probably not going to stay open long. So explain why looking on the internet at reviews of a product may suffer from a non-response bias. Who's probably going to go online and fill out a review for the product they bought?
People who didn't like it.
People who didn't like it.
People who are at the extreme on both sides.
Extreme on both sides. That's correct. So the people that like really, really liked the product are people that are like, man, that was such a waste of money. It was terrible. I'll never buy it again. The people in the middle, it did what it was supposed to. They're probably not going to respond. They're probably not going to fill out the review online. Response bias. How can we actually get bias from somebody's response? And that happens sometimes as well. We could get bias the way people respond to the questions that we ask them. So possible response bias could be the tendency of a person to answer untruthfully. Can we do anything about that? No. As a researcher, as the person creating the survey, there's not really much I can do about that, but maybe people are lying. Maybe we're asking high school people, 10th and 11th graders like you guys, maybe we fill out a survey on drug use. Maybe we fill out a survey on drug use. Have you ever vaped before? If you don't want anybody to know that you vaped, you might put what? You might put no, but you just lied. So you might not be telling the truth. There's not really much as the researcher or the person giving the survey. There's not really a whole lot I can do about that. But my results might be biased because you lied and like you didn't want me to see that you have vaped before and you weren't being completely honest on that survey. The other way, untruthfully, or the other word we need to put here is misleadingly. So you might answer a question misleadingly based on the way I asked the question. So I might ask a question. Don't you agree that vaping is bad for you? Don't you agree that vaping is bad for you? The way I've worded that question, I'm trying to elicit a certain response from you. One, that don't you agree?
Yes.
Don't you agree? Like I'm trying to get you to agree with me just by putting that phrase at the beginning of the sentence. Do you think that students who do their homework make better grades? Maybe the way I worded that question is trying to elicit a certain response from you. Maybe like, oh, because they did their homework, they might make better grades. So we got to really look at the way we've worded these questions. So there's 4 examples here, and we're asking if there's any concerns with response bias. Could the way the question's worded elicit a certain response from the person answering that question? So what is wrong with your current school? What is wrong with your current school? What might be the issue there?
They're like happy or something bad.
Yeah, they're assuming what? Or they're implying
Something's good.
that something is wrong. Does something have to be wrong? No. But now if I'm going to answer this question, I'm going to look for something that might be wrong. Even though before this question was asked, I might not have thought of anything being wrong with my school. So the word wrong here, they're implying that there is something wrong. To improve education. So they've given me a positive, like, hey, this is going to be a positive thing. They're trying to influence me like, hey, this positive thing is going to happen if we raise taxes to build more schools. So to improve education, should taxes be raised to fund building more schools? The fact that they put to improve education, there's the issue. So they threw this positive out there like, hey, if we do this, this positive result's going to happen. Do we know the positive result's going to come from building more schools? No, we don't know that. But what's the person that wrote this question trying to influence me? They're trying to influence my answer. It's like, yeah, we should. Because if I don't, then education is not going to improve. What is a better way that we could ask this question without
The next part.
yeah, just the next part, nothing but this part right here. That would be a much better way to word this question. Should we raise taxes to fund building more schools? That's it. There shouldn't be a negative or a positive thrown in there to try to get me to answer it one way or the other.
Well, logically, wouldn't it be better for those raised taxes to go to the schools you're already having fund them more?
It might be, yes. Why are teenage drivers dangerous?
They're new.
They're new, right? But this question, the way this question is worded, is trying to elicit a certain response from you.
That's that why.
Are all teenage drivers dangerous? Maybe, because they're new, because they text and drive when they're not supposed to. They talk on the phone and they're not supposed to. They're not paying attention when they should be. They go too fast. But what is this question trying to get me to do? It's trying to get me to come up with reasons that teenage drivers are dangerous. But what is it implying? This question is implying that all teenage drivers are dangerous, which might not be the case. Hopefully not the case. I see some of you drive in the student parking lot after school, and it scares me a little bit. But this question, the way this question's wording is implying that every single teenage driver is dangerous. When I read that, I think like 16, but teenage is also 19. Those people have been driving for 4 years because they got their permit at 15. So if you've been driving for 4 years, I wouldn't call you a new driver at that point. You're probably driving to college by yourself. So that question's worded poorly. How long does it take you to get to school? Does anybody see anything wrong with that question? Yeah, that's a great question. I don't see anything